there friends, welcome back to episode 3 of
Concept Limbo!
And thank you for all your comments and likes so far. You've clearly been digging the series as much as I've enjoyed digging up concepts and designs from rusty days gone by. In the last 2 episodes, we've taken a long hard look at what happened to things like vehicles, horse riding, boats, handcuffs and, funnily enough, fishing traps, which only a week after the episode I featured them in were actually included in the game. Who'da thunk it? Nearly 2 years after the original concept art too. Well, let's see if we can bump some more designs up the to-do list, shall we? And in this first of a 2-part episode, I'm going to be covering weapons. Now, we're spoilt for choice in Rust already when it comes to things we can jab, throw, fire at and poke our fellow humans with, but there have been a large number of other devious devices suggested in the past that never actually made it, and it's some of those that we're going to take a tour of now. So please jump into the rusty DeLorean with me, and we'll start by travelling back in time to the 17th of November 2014, where Megan Tupper, who's been responsible for so much of the artwork we've seen on the dev blogs, posted these designs for harpoon guns to the Rust Concepts Trello board. As you can see, there's a fair bit of difference between the 3 designs, mainly in the stocks and grips, but also in the way the rope is stored when the harpoon is loaded. The very next day, she posted another couple of concepts, this time in colour. The top is an amalgamation of 2 of the previous designs, whereas the bottom one, which turned out to be the favourite, has a crank handle for reeling the rope back in after use. Very handy. She was clearly in the zone on this design as the next day, 19th of November, she hit us with a selection of 6 different modifications for the tip. A couple worth pointing out are number 2, which has a grappling hook and could be useful for raiding, and number 6, just for the comedy value really, and the fact that if you shot someone with it, not only would they get spiked, but they'd also receive a nasty suction mark. The next day, Min, who also works for Facepunch and who's often referred to on the dev blogs as Gooseman, commented that he thought they looked incredible but had some reservations regarding the logistics. Regarding the rope attached to the spear, I'm not sure how we can animate that properly, as it would be difficult to attach a rope on the view model to the target that we just hit, so it might be best to not attach the rope to the spear when making the 3D model. To explain what he meant by this, it's useful to understand exactly what a view model is. For instance, this is the view I have in first person of my character holding the flamethrower. This is what's called the view model. What everybody else sees when they're looking at my character though is actually a different version called the world model. And in fact, if I go into the debug camera whilst in first person, you can better see what I mean. This is the definition of well armed. Quite often with view models, parts that the player will never see are removed. Secondly, parts that the player does see are very detailed. And third, the view model as a whole is distorted somewhat and positioned differently to look its best from the one viewing angle. The same goes for all of the objects that you can hold and see in first person in Rust. Now, I'm not a game developer by any stretch, but going back to the harpoon, I can certainly imagine a few logistical issues with attaching ropes from the gun to projectiles simultaneously in the first person view model and the world model, both of which are functioning separately. That being said, Min didn't think it was impossible and then added, I think the most feasible way of handling the rope in Unity would be to do it as a dynamic object, like how the Source engine handles ropes. We could dynamically attach each end to the spear and the gun. So with that, a production brief for the design was submitted by Megan to the Rust Production Design Trello board, and that is where it has patiently languished until this very day. It did cause a bit of excitement on Reddit on the 21st though, and there were some interesting suggestions from the community. This should keep the dead ragdoll corpse attached to the string so you can go run around dragging them Mad Max style. That would be amazing, of course, with an option to release them, or if you spin around fast enough you could use them as a weapon. It would be sweet if this could be used as a grappling gun also, but if the harpoon spike was able to be reached, anyone can detach it manually. Here's a scenario. Hey, get off my base! Yanks harpoon spike out of wall. Person climbing the rope falls to their death. If it was ever added, then I can imagine some interesting scenarios involving being able to latch onto roof campers and pull them off their bases, or maybe just being able to grapple up there yourself. But what do you think? Are they OP, or would you like to have them? Leave me a comment please. Now, we've had basic bows in Rust almost as long as we've had legs and arms, and more recently we've enjoyed the addition of crossbows which sacrifice rate of fire for range and power. But did you know that there'd been concepts for a further 3 tiers of bow? No? Well, come with me and let's revisit the Trello boards where on the 8th of August 2014, Megan once again posted designs for some Tier 2 composite and recurve bows. These would, I guess, be a bit more powerful than the standard hunting bow, but still look suitably low-tech and makeshift, so wouldn't be that much harder to craft. I mean, I don't know, I'm just throwing things out there really. Anyway, 3 days later, on the 11th of August, she went on to post some more designs for Tier 3 bows. Now these definitely look more refined, and all but one have sights for greater accuracy. Most of the parts on these look like they're crafted from scratch rather than repurposed, so we're starting to stray a little from the overall aesthetic of Rust, but they still look awesome. Finally, on the 13th of August, she uploaded a set of designs for Tier 4 bows, highly crafted and with 3 of them being compound. I can imagine these being a devastating weapon in the right hands, but perhaps they're a bit too nice for Rust. What do you think? Nothing more was done with these concepts, sadly, although the basic bow that we do have has been tweaked several times, and now we're looking at a range of new arrowheads with special properties and effects. But I think it would be good if the team revisited them at some point, especially as many players really enjoy using primitive weapons despite having more modern artillery to hand. Also, the upcoming XP system and its associated crafting progression would be a perfect opportunity to implement something like this. On a side note, in devblog number 73 from 13th of August 2015, we were given a very brief glimpse at some ideas for quivers, as Paul Bradley at Facepunch explained. I worked up some ideas for a quiver this week. I think it would be nice to have things that display what ammo and weaponry your player is actually packing. Yes, it would be nice to know exactly where you're pulling those arrows from, along with being able to actually see what weaponry both you and other players are packing. And if you kept up with my weekly update vids, then you'll know that only at the end of April this year, Paul again showed us some concepts for a weapon and tool harness along the same sort of lines. I've been working on a primitive solution for attaching tools and weapons to players. We're considering having the player spawn with a simple harness, so right from the get-go they can sling spears and hang tools visibly off their body. I quite like this idea personally. I think it's only reasonable to be able to see if someone's carrying a rocket launcher, and I think it's a bit of a stretch to imagine that they've got something that big stashed in their crack. Anyway, for the next concept I want to show you, we're going to set our time circuits for 28th of May 2015. We're on devblog 62. It was decided that we needed a bit more variety to melee weapons, and once again Paul drew up a few concepts that made use of repurposed junk. As he put it, it's mostly just rough idea scribbling, and a lot of these will evolve from the thumbnails, so these are just brainstorm starting off points. We don't want to go too medieval with this stuff, but at the same time keep them practical and fairly realistic to what you would find and use from an old world. Crude rebar club and scrap metal blades, a lot might naturally open up other possibilities in the fighting system, such as two-handed slow weapons and parrying. In the next blog, the designs were narrowed down and refined, and I'm sure some of these are starting to look familiar to you. A fortnight later, a high poly pass on them had been done, and they were ready for texturing, which happened over the following 2 weeks. It was now just a matter of rigging them up for use in the game, and by devblog 70 on 23rd of July, they had all been added. Well, except one. Did you spot it? Yes, the hacksaw design was missing, and is to this day. But the strangest thing is that the week after all of the others had been added, we were actually shown the animated view model. That was the last we ever saw of it though, and I'm not sure why. The hard work had been done, and in fact, although it can't be found to use anywhere in the game, it is possible to spawn the world model with the right plugin, and it's definitely meant to be there, so why can't we get our hooves on it yet? Was it just decided there were enough melee weapons already? Was it being saved for a rainy day? Or maybe my favourite theory, that it was decided to save it to be used as a new tool at a later date instead. Who knows? I've yet to find out, but perhaps it will surprise us one day. There were just too many weapons concepts to include and cover properly in this episode, so in the next part I'm going to take a look at a few more, including some from the community that are worthy of closer inspection, so stay tuned for that. Watch the other videos in the series, give this one a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to me for much more Rust and other stuff. Come and say hi to me on Twitch, Twitter and Steam, and I'll catch you all in the next video. In the meantime, stay rusty. Cheerio.